Welcome to Athletes, Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey. I'm Rob Finkelstein, founder and CEO of Alumni Direct. We've created a platform to help alumni to network and connect amongst their affinity groups, whether it be athletes, it could be college alumni, business alumni associations. But this show is all about talking to collegiate athletes, former collegiate athletes, professional athletes, and we talk about transitioning out of sports, which is a major issue today, whether it's mental health, financial literacy, just knowing what they want to do in the future. And the whole idea is to teach and inspire athletes that there is life after sports. So we're really excited today to have Steve Ryan on with us. How you doing today, Steve?
I'm doing well, Rob. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. It's our pleasure as well. So Steve played, he's one of these guys that loves sports growing up, playing all different sports, but he played football and baseball at college. He went to St. Olaf. And then once he got done playing, he kind of got into the marketing world. He was in a marketing agency, ultimately doing a lot of work with NASCAR. And today, this is going to be exciting because we're going to hear a lot more about it. He's one of the partners in the National Rugby Football League. And, you know, rugby people out there, but it's an exciting story. And I think it's something that we're going to certainly look out for the next several years. So we'll go into that later on. Anyway, the first question I always like to ask is, talk about playing sports growing up and how that shaped you, like leading up into high school or college.
Yeah, no, again, thanks for your time, Rob. You know, I'm a uber competitive person. I am the kid, you know, as a young lad who, whenever I lost in anything, I might be that kid crying on the sidelines because I was so mad that I lost. But growing up, sports was a big component of our family. I'm a middle child, the forgotten middle child, if you will. Older brother played sports, sister tried everything. I did everything from soccer, like here in the US, everyone plays soccer as a kid, and eventually that fizzles away. I even went into karate, if you want to call that a sport, and was successful as a kid in that. But it really shaped everything that I did in sports. My dad taught us, if we're going to do it, you got to at least try everything, and you got to make it and give it all you can for at least a season. Then you can determine if you want to keep on and supporting that. But I really gravitated towards team sports. I love the team sports environment. I love the camaraderie within the team. And as I went through high school, ultimately I played football, American football, basketball, and baseball. I had some success on there, and as I started to, if you will, get recruited, you know, a lot on the Division II, Division III level. I had some Division I universities look at me and had some great conversations, but it was more along the lines, hey, come on, walk on. Hey, you have an opportunity to earn a scholarship, you know, a couple of years into it. So it was really that balancing act. And me as a kid growing up, like anyone, I had Michael Jordan posters. I had Kirby Puckett, we're based here in Minneapolis. So I had all the twins on my wall wanting to play in the major leagues, wanting to play in the NFL. Then you quickly realize that opportunity is probably slim and far and few between. And that's where I said, as we looked at colleges, universities to go to, I said, well, I could go to a Division III school. I could play two sports, and I got an opportunity to potentially play two sports for all 4 years. And that's the route I went, and extremely grateful I went that route. I was able to play and start all 4 years in football and baseball at St. Olaf. And it's a competitive league. But yet it has that right balance of being competitive, athletic, and getting education, and also enjoying the college atmosphere that it is. And post-college, that's where you jump into the workforce. I did have an opportunity to try out for some semi-professional baseball. And again, another question, would it be fun? Yes. Do I have a whole summer to make a couple $1,000 to try to make the major leagues? And that's where I said, no. We're just going to jump into the workforce and still play a competitive sports kind of on the side.
Yeah, no, and it's the one thing I commend you on too is just having having the foresight to look at the big picture of like, you know, like you said, you could have maybe, you know, played on one of Division I, but walk on, and just to look at the hey, let me find the right school for me where I can play, you know, probably be a star player there, but also enjoy the aspects of my, you know, the education and just, you know, just like, I guess, social life and everything that a lot of athletes don't necessarily get to enjoy. So that was good. I mean, I talked to one guy on a podcast, one of my earlier podcasts, and he has a company, and they work with the high school athletes and their parents to find the right place for them. So they kind of look at more of the big picture of just, it's not about just, hey, I want to play at Notre Dame or, Georgia, Alabama, but like I want that whole complete college experience. So that's great that you did that. So it sounded like you wanted the dream of being a professional athlete. Was there the particular sport that you really wanted, or just any one of those sports?
Yeah, it depends on the season, right? Summer, springtime, it was baseball. Come fall, I was all about football. And I'll say this, as a football kid growing up, that was probably my least favorite sport. I did not like getting hit. Football, you got to hit. Luckily enough, I was fast enough to run away from people and crazy enough to eventually enjoy it. But going back to your point, and now that I have two little girls at home and raising kids, now I'm the dad and they're playing softball and all the different sports. It is interesting to see different parenting styles that kids may want to specialize now, with the hope, and I think it's more the parents' hope than the kids' hope, that my kid may be the next NHL star. And you see it more and more as my kids get older, and my friends' kids are older and going through the high school ranks, and they burn out and they don't play volleyball in college after spending tens of thousands of dollars playing a sport, which is still worth it, right? It's still worth it, I think, from a team environment, and playing sports teaches you so much more than what you do on the court and the pitch. But I think I've gained even more perspective as I had my own kids.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. It's interesting. And even, like we talk about and we'll talk, get a lot into the whole transitioning out of sports. But for me, I think it was a harder transition as a parent and coach than it was as an athlete transition out of sports. Because, I did the same thing. I mean, I coached my son through just, Little League baseball and football and soccer and all. Ultimately, managed a travel baseball team for many years. And you're right. It's just you do get a different perspective, be on the other side of it. And there are a lot of parents that are like, my little Johnny's a superstar. They're going to be a Major League Baseball player. Like, congratulations. No, they're not. Like,
Right.
and it does lead to burnout and stuff like that too. But so let's talk about in college, and it's different. I'm going to preface this. It's different today than it probably was back then when you went to school, when I went to school. But was there education on teaching the athletes about that bigger picture? And I know it's going to be a little bit different, like at a Division III school versus Division I school, but what did you see, and maybe what are you seeing today of from different colleges?
No, that's the short answer. The athletes had some additional opportunities and additional support. Going into my freshman year for football, you go 2-3 weeks before anyone else goes to campus. You're 18 years old. You're moving away from home. I knew a couple of friends who were going to the school that were actually going to play football too, but you really don't know anyone. It's a whole new environment. The benefit that I had is I got to go 3 weeks early and meet 100 other guys that instantly were friends and bonded because of football. But as far as the educational side, and then over the 4-year period, getting us educated on what that means and how to utilize it, there wasn't a whole lot that was offered. We relied more on our coaches, and fortunately I had some good coaches within baseball and football that educated us to a certain degree. But I would say the university, college as a whole system, there's really not a track that say, okay, athletes, this is what you mean to our university. This is your opportunities that may be slightly different, good, bad, and indifferent, and really helped us along that path. I definitely think it is changing, even at the Division III level, right? Even at little old St. Olaf College that I went to, it is changing. We are starting to understand the positive impact that athletes can have if you foster it the right way. And then you can get into the NIL and the Division I, which becomes even more amplified compared to the Division II, Division III level. So I think it is getting better. There's always room for improvement because it's still, I think, still a little bit of the wild, wild west of what NIL means. But even if you take away NIL, the network that the athletes have, I think that's one of the biggest takeaways that my coaches taught me. It says, you are already part of a brotherhood. If you played football for St. Olaf, if you played baseball for St. Olaf, you are instantly part of a brotherhood. Hence, the first job I got out of school was a former football alumni at the college I went to. right? So it's a matter of leveraging your network, leveraging your alumni, and doing it as a freshman all the way to a senior. Don't do it the last 6 months because you're going to graduate
Right.
a university.
Yeah, it's funny. You're like kind of reading my mind on all the different topics here and hitting them. But yeah, so we'll talk about that in a minute because I totally agree and get into the whole alumni connection. But just back to the education side, I think well, one of the things that we've talked about doing is trying to go into universities with as a partner and working with different, whether it's the mental health, the financial literacy, career people, people that maybe can teach them about sales or promoting themselves, but to give them a little bit more. And I had one athlete say he was a football player at his school, and he just talked about the importance of they didn't have that. And if there was a class, like a workshop, a 4-week workshop, or even a semester that forced the athletes to take, because that's the other thing too. I mean, especially you being competitive, I'm sure the last thing you really care about is, in a sense, is like, what am I going to be doing afterwards? Because you're just zoned into your sport, understandably, especially when, some of these Division I athletes that are like the star athletes that are on scholarships and all that, they might have that tunnel vision. But I think, we, the schools and other people need to do a better job of helping them to ultimately, when sport is over, they're well prepared.
I 1,000%. I think that's is way overdue and well needed, all the way from the mental health side of it, which is exciting that there's not a stigma, I don't think, much around mental health.
Yeah.
Because the highest level of the LeBron Jameses of the world, the Loves of the world have come up, say, I see a therapist. This is why it's important. It's a tool. If you're an athlete, you got to, again, we're all about tools and leverage and how do we get better. Well, working on your mental health is just as important as working on your fitness and your skills in whatever sport you're at. So, but again, that's not taught, and it is more so. But I think there needs to be a dedicated program within the college ranks that teaches these athletes around mental health, around what is life after sports. How can you handle that? And again,
Yeah.
I struggle with that, and anyone who's competitive, when you take that away from you in a structured environment, and I had it through high school, through 4 years in 2 sports in college, and then it's gone. So I struggled with, I need to scratch that itch.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't need to be at that level, but I just need to get on a court or play another sport and do something. And there is that I had that transitional period of how do I fill that void?
Yeah, no, it's difficult. And I think so there's different things to help between the education. And then, the next kind of topic we talked about, and you hit on it, is just the importance of that alumni connection. I think it's at any school, because to your point, is like a brotherhood for the baseball and football. I think just the school in general. I mean, people kind of light up when they talk about their alumni, especially as they get further away from their school. And so you mentioned that part of you getting a job was from an alumni. So did you see alumni coming back, and were the schools kind of reaching out to the alumni saying, hey, come back, and not just for their golf tournaments and things like that, but to come back and truly work with the athletes and help them out across all sports?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure every college, every university is different. The great thing about the St. Olaf that I went to is they do a great job across all sports. They encourage them. Yes, you have the golf tournaments, people come. So that's great. It's more of a fundraiser, and it's a good reason to come back and see people you haven't seen in a while. But more importantly, hey, get involved. I'll say this: there's one older gentleman who's a baseball alumni, well known within the university, has a successful financial firm. I think he's hired dozens of baseball players. So he not only supports them financially, but he supports them post college. Right. He's the guy from a mentorship. If people are in the business financial space, he's the first people we send our baseball guys. Hey, you should go talk to this guy. He can help, whether a job, but he can help you along. He can help you navigate. He can help from a mentorship perspective. And the same thing on the football side. So that is the one great thing that I got out of, outside of a good education,
Right.
From St. Olaf, is just the alumni from the athletic side of the table, especially in the sports that I was involved in.
Yeah, and it's so critical, and we encourage, I mean, people in general, but like, so we're talking about athletes, just expand your network, and alumni are out there willing to help. And I think, some schools, the one common theme, it also seems like, is it depends on the coaching staff too, in a sense, because a lot of times, especially with these bigger programs where there's a changeover in the coaching, they might not be reaching out as much to alumni that were from other coaching staff, so to speak. And but that kind of falls back, I guess, on the athletic department in the school too, to just encourage them to come back. And then obviously the alumni athletes or alumni in general need to want to do it too.
Yeah, and I tell people that are going to St. Olaf for their first year, anyone going to college for that matter, your freshman year, you may not want to go to this networking event that's at the cafeteria, or this event that seems kind of boring because you want to go meet up with your friends. But I say, you go take the 30 minutes, meet someone who's 50 years old that played football, who's at the university, shake hands, remember their name, follow up with them, because that relationship may take place 4 years from now or 15 years from now. So to network early and often, I think is a big takeaway. And honestly, I wish I would have done that more. That kind of came to light. They tell you that, but you're like, oh, I'm 18 years old, 19 years old. I don't need to worry about that. It came more to light junior, senior year. So any incoming freshman, I would say make those relationships across all sports, across all networks with that alumni connection.
Yeah, that's great advice. Because I've talked to like agents, and they'll talk about their players, and they say the best time to network and connect is when you're still playing, because a lot of these guys, again, if they have that tunnel vision, then they've played their sport, and if they're fortunate to play professionally, and all of a sudden they're done, and like, okay, what now? So encouraging them like you just did, as far as starting young age, even in high school, just to be open to the resources that are out there, whether it be the coaches, the parents, just other people as you move along in life. So it is a critical thing for the networking and connecting. So we talked a little bit offline, but let's talk about NIL, name, image, and likeness. And I know when you went to school, same thing with me. It wasn't around back then, but kind of give me your thoughts, positive and negative, just in on NIL in general.
Yeah, I think we all hear the 1%. We all hear that quarterback who just got $1 million contract or an agreement with Alabama. We hear that gymnast. We hear this one star basketball player. But what about the 99.5% of everyone, athletes from mainly Division I, but all the way trickling down to Division III? I think it's good. You got to put it in perspective. I don't think it's going to, for what happens on the field, on the court, on the pitch, I don't think that's going to change the game. Alabama's still going to be Alabama in football, right? The Crimson Tide they're still going to be who they are. But how do you get education around that? Everyone else, that offensive lineman, that other gymnast, that volleyball player, how can you utilize that for the better, right? And I think the negative side, or the education of that, needs to happen. It goes down to the mental side of it, and that's just more of a social conversation that needs to happen, and putting things in perspective. But I think it's good. We need to embrace it, right? It's like when the internet came, people didn't want that, but you just got to embrace it. It's here. It's not going to change.
Right.
But how can you foster it for the better? How can you surround these athletes with good people? I think that's also a key takeaway, is you can get one athlete at any different level. And if they're stewing in their own stuff, if they're trying to figure that out, but if you don't have the good, whether it's the right coaches, assistant coaches, teachers, family members, kind of surrounding these people so they can be a sounding board. And then me as an athlete to always be comfortable raising my hand and asking questions, looking for help of how to navigate that space, because it is new for everyone.
Yeah, and I guess the key is the education side. The two areas that always come up is one, the financial literacy, because all of a sudden, and I always say this too in each podcast, but it's not just the athletes, it's young people in general. But for them to understand, like, hey, you do have to pay taxes. Right. I brought this up a few times. It's kind of a sad story. This one guy did really well. I think he got, I don't know, like $30,000-$40,000 NIL deal. But him and his buddies spent the money. And then what happened was, because he got that amount of money, it took him over a financial threshold or his family, that he lost his scholarship. Wow. And so that's the kind of stuff that shouldn't happen. I think, there's a need for that. Also, you talk about social media, and social media in general, it's great, but just knowing how to navigate it properly. Because, we all know, you hear, some of these sad stories about, kids are kids, and some of the things they say and just, and do, they come back to haunt them years later.
Yeah, and again, it's perspective, right? These athletes see that quarterback making $1 million or getting some Kentucky Fried Chicken commercial or whatever it is, and they think, I want to aspire to that. But you got to step back and say, is that really my goal? What is my goal? Is that feasible? Do I really want to get that? Okay, if you have the skills and want to get that, then what are the steps to get to that point? So it comes with perspective, with anything, with what you do. And again, surrounding yourself and getting educated and be willing to ask for help.
Yeah, no, that's the key, just being willing to ask for help. So talk about, we're talking about like transition out of sports, and you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but talk about your transition out, especially being that competitive athlete that you were, and all of a sudden, your sports career is kind of coming to end, and you're entering the next chapter in your life, which you got into the marketing role. Talk a little bit about that, and then give some advice to athletes on how they should handle that transition out of sports, whether it's college or ultimately professional.
Yeah, again, like I mentioned, I struggled initially, knowing there's an itch, and there's still an itch in me, the competitive itch. It needs to be scratched.
Right.
So you look at a number of different things. All right, I'm not going professional. I know that. There's other semi-professional baseball. I could do that, but that wouldn't allow me to jump into the workforce, knowing, I'm not going to make the major leagues. That ain't going to happen. So then there's other lower, we call it town ball baseball, if you will, that for a number of summers, if you will, scratched my itch. That was great. And again, it scratched my itch, one, from a competitive perspective, but two, just being around the guys, being around the locker room, being on the field. Because when you do that from when you're yay big all the way through college, and you take that away, that's a big identity crisis, if you will. So I was fortunate enough to continue to play baseball post-college competitively, but yet not overly serious, but yet competitively on the pitch. And then you pick up other things, from volleyball with a group of buddies that we were able to play competitively, after work. But yeah, there is always that struggle. And even today, where now I don't have the time to play baseball. Now I'm coaching, if you will, but yet you don't want to be too competitive as a coach. I'm more of a dad than a coach, and they're little girls trying to play softball or soccer.
Right.
To put that in perspective. So even today, I do struggle from a personal perspective, knowing I still want to get out on the pickleball court or go golf or go do something, all in fun, but at least, sweat with a few buddies on the pickleball court or on a basketball court, and at least be competitive out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that doesn't go away, and I guess the one thing that comes across a lot too is just that athlete skill set. So you're talking about a lot of companies want to hire the athletes, and I mean, just the DNA of an athlete, just the leadership skills, the team spirit, just everything, the hard work, the preparation that goes into being an athlete. And we had one show where gentleman, he was done after college, and ended up getting into the business world, and ultimately became a CEO of some big companies. And he just talked about imploring athletes, don't think of it as being over. It's just the next chapter. I mean, it's kind of like, here you are, you're like Steve, the baseball player, the football player, or Rob, the runner, Susie, the Olympic swimmer, whatever it might be. But, you're not the sport, you're the person, and you've got many years ahead of you.
Yeah, I mean, it's the skill sets you learn in all sports, team sports, individual sports, translates into business or whatever your career is. And I take with me with what I'm doing today, and building the National Rugby Football League, and my marketing role, and building and helping build that company. So the skill sets are there, and it's fostering what you did on a field, but fostering on a business. And how can you win in the business world? Because that's still very competitive. How can you win in getting that next media deal? How can you win to go find that next rugby star, right? What is that new post that you're going to do that's going to take the business to the next frontier? So it's still very competitive, just in a different light.
Yeah, no, that's good. So let's talk now. I mean, we talk about what you're doing with the National Rugby Football League. We talked a little bit about, kind of explain a little bit how you're doing, and there's a couple aspects that we'll go into with it, the kind of tie into transitioning out of sports as well.
Yeah, overall, rugby, most Americans don't know this, but rugby is the seventh most popular sport globally, according to fans. It's played in 120 different countries, approaching 900 million followers, but yet, and it's a 200-year-old sport, right? But it's only been professional since 1995. But yet it is one of the most, if not the most, under-commercialized sports globally, right? It's growing here in the U.S., but yet still at a very amateur, semi-professional level. So our mission, Rob, is how do you take this global sport that's loved and played everywhere else, right? American football, the NFL, NCAA football wouldn't be here if it weren't for rugby, right? Football was born out of the sport of rugby. So how do you take this sport and bring it to the most lucrative sports and entertainment market, that being the United States, and introduce it to a fan base here in the U.S. that doesn't know much about the sport of rugby? So ultimately, what we want to create is we want to create the NFL of rugby in the off season, April through July, bring it to a fan base here in the U.S. and really uncover the sport and truly build the next big sports and entertainment brand in America.
That sounds great. I'm sure people get excited by that, and you've talked a lot about storytelling and the importance. You just gave it good background on rugby. So one of the things that we discussed offline was how you're getting your players, and I noticed talking about getting giving opportunities to former NFL players. And so talk a little bit about that, because I think that does play a key role in transitioning out of sports, because maybe it's another avenue that NFL athletes or even former collegiate football players can look at.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And our journey began knowing we wanted to do something in the sport of rugby. We had an option to buy the Rugby Lions right out of Rugby England, one of the oldest teams out there. Ultimately, we said that would have been fun, but why isn't this sport here? It came back here, knowing here in the U.S. we have a fan base that's addicted to tackle sports, that being American football. And also we have an athletic pool that's truly untapped, right? You look come September, there's just about 1,000 guys that get cut by the NFL. And these are just the guys trying to make an NFL team. Doesn't include the NCAA football guys that don't make it. These guys are still 23 years old, 6'5", 250, can lift a house and are as fast as wind. They just haven't been aware of the sport of rugby. And that's really where our journey began after not buying the Lions. So yeah, these are great athletes, but can they come over to the sport of rugby? Can they pick up a rugby ball and be some of the best? We held combines, just like NFL combines, 8 across the U.S. to prove that thesis out. Sent a couple guys to England, a guy to South Africa. These are ex-football guys. These guys were man of the match in a matter of months of picking up a rugby ball. So what's exciting to us is you have guys that are on an NFL team, right? That are part of what's the NFL salary cap? A few $100 million, right?
Yeah.
And then they get a red card, if you will, in their locker room. They get released by a team, right? So now they're making zero and they don't know what to do, right? You have, well, I guess you have the XFL 3.0 that's out there now. Maybe there's Canada, maybe there's the USFL you could go to. But we have an opportunity for these athletes, because their skill sets within American football that translates really nicely into the sport of rugby, that not only can you make more money compared to going to, say, the XFL, we'll put media, we'll put resources, we'll put education, we'll put healthcare behind your brand and who you are. But you can not only be a star here in the U.S. on the rugby pitch, but it truly is a global opportunity, knowing rugby is played not only here in the U.S., but across 120 different countries. And then also you look at it from an athlete perspective, maybe they're close to retirement, right? They're going to leave the field, the basketball court, the lacrosse pitch, or I'm a runner and I'm going to stop running. We also have an opportunity for these athletes to now actually own equity into sports, right? You can look at 154, there's about 154 professional sports teams here in the U.S. You can look at the ownership, line them up on a wall. For the most part, they're all billionaires and they all relatively look the same, right? for the longest time, if I'm not a LeBron James or a Tom Brady or a top 0.5% that could actually afford to buy a professional team, these athletes have made a ton of money for these owners, but they've never have been given an opportunity to actually own equity in sports. So we're finding great success with these athletes that are post-career or towards the end of their career that say, you know what, I still have my competitive juices. I may not want to pick up a rugby ball, but I actually want to own something. I want to translate my skills that I've learned professionally and now actually own and grow a league. So it's an exciting time with where we're at to provide these opportunities to these athletes to continue their playing career, but also from a business perspective and an ownership perspective.
Yeah, that's great, and it does seem like a trend. I mean, you look out there, you've got these athletes that are starting to own like esports teams and pickleball teams. So it seems like it's ripe for that, and it's great, like you said, that they haven't had that opportunity to come to the table, and that now they have that with your league, and I'm sure as it expands as well, getting off and talk a little bit about when it's going to be starting up and when people can start finding out more about it.
Yeah, so our approach here has never been, Rob, to throw 30 guys on a pitch, give them a couple bucks, and call ourselves professional. Again, our mission is how do you take this sport and bring it to a whole new fan base? And one of my backgrounds, I spent about a decade in the NASCAR space. NASCAR is America's motorsports, right? Always has been, probably always will be. Formula One is the rest of the world. Formula One has tried for decades to get into America, really unsuccessfully, until COVID hit. A program on Netflix called Drive to Survive was released. It was a docuseries taking people behind the scenes of Ferrari versus Mercedes, this driver versus that driver, really the soap opera of what Formula One is. And now 400,000 people go to Austin, Texas to watch a race.
Wow.
Miami had a race. Vegas has a race this year, and they'll crush revenue records. And really what that did through storytelling and content, it not only, yes, brought over the NASCAR, the motorsports people, but it brought a fan base who didn't know anything about Formula One into the sport. And now you can see the result of that. So back to your question of how we're releasing the NRFL here in 2024, we have our version of Drive to Survive, right? How do we bring this fan base that we want to come after, these football fans, these crossover fans into the sport through content, through storytelling. And then in 2024, we bring a number of teams on tour through our showcase series. So now the fans that have been watching the building of the league, watching that Alabama star, his transition into the sport, watching the story of this owner who was locked out by buying a team because he wasn't or she wasn't a billionaire, their journey into the league. Now they can touch, taste, and feel the product as we go on tour in a festival-like environment. So we'll go to a major metroplex, rent out a premium venue for multi-days, put significant capital around these events, around music, entertainment, family-friendly, the best of really each city can offer to draw those fans in, knowing once they experience rugby for the first time, we truly feel rugby will sell itself, and that's how you build that fan base. And then from the years out, we add more teams and have conservative expansion all the way leading up to 2031, which is the Rugby World Cup, which is going to be hosted in America. And the Rugby World Cup, which most Americans don't know, is the third largest sporting event in the world behind the Soccer World Cup and the Olympics. So it's a massive opportunity, and the window is truly ripe for people to join forces.
And so the players in your league will be able to compete for that, like the top players?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we're changing the dynamics of what the rugby athlete looks like. We're truly raising the water table of what that athlete looks like. The Rugby World Cup this year is taking place in France in a couple months time period. The U.S. is not going to be there. The U.S. didn't even make the cut, right? So we need to change the landscape. That's, again, our mission of how do you introduce this sport to these premium elite football athletes into the sport. So when you want to compete in the Olympics, which rugby is an Olympic sport, when you want to compete every 4 years around the Rugby World Cup, we can from an America, USA perspective. And again, with us being, if you will, the premier league of the sport that people can watch and follow on a year-to-year basis.
Got it. Well, that sounds great. I mean, I'm looking forward to the stories. I'm sure, like you said, we'll look for the documentaries on Netflix, all that one, talking about the journey into this the growth of the league. So good luck with all that. I mean, it does seem exciting. I think people are always open to new sports coming out there. I mean, so that's good. So how do people talk about how people can find you and how they can find more about the league?
Yeah, I mean, easy enough. You can go to our website. It's thenrfl.com. All our social handles are out there from Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. So happy to connect. And again, as we have a sign in our office here, the world is run by those that show up, right? We know there's going to be a number of people that are going to be in the end zone saying, "Oh, I knew you guys could do it. What an exciting! I'm a fan. I'm a follower. How can I help?" Which is great. But again, we're looking for those people that want to join us on kickoff, because that's truly where the fun is. That's where the excitement is. That's where the team camaraderie is built. So if anyone has anything to say or wants to connect, happy to connect with them. And Rob, appreciate you showing up and giving us this opportunity and what you do from an educational perspective with this podcast.
Yeah, no, and it's thank you. And it's been great having you on here. And you could find us on alumnidirect.com. You could also follow us on various channels, LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram, and follow the show though. We're across all the podcast networks, also on our Alumni Direct YouTube page. But I think that the more people that we can impact, there's a lot of good out there, and there's a lot of great content on these shows. And just I think obviously we want to help as many athletes as we can. I mean, you help one athlete, every athlete that will help is great. So again, we appreciate everything, and we'll look forward to the next show.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.